Hi everyone, welcome back to CSCI100 Intro to Computer Science. This is lecture 6, and in this lecture, we're going to be covering a new programming construct called a loop. And in particular, we're going to look at for loops and while loops in Python. But before we get into these new ideas, I have some announcements for you. The big announcement for you is that your first exam will be coming up next week on Wednesday, September 22nd. And you don't need to panic if this is going to be your first college exam. We're going to release a practice exam on Friday that'll be in the same format as the actual exam coming up on Wednesday. It'll be kind of questions of similar difficulty, similar length, same kind of topics. It'll actually be from the same bank of questions that we've written for your actual exam. And so you can take the weekend to practice those questions, Friday and over the weekend, and come to office hours. There'll be lots of office hours on Friday, Monday, and Tuesday. Check the class calendar. And of course, the best way to ask a question if you can't come in person to an office hour is to ask on Piazza. And you'll probably get a pretty quick answer because there's a lot of STAs and instructors on there, and your fellow students can jump in too. The material in the exam is going to be up through this lecture. So we're not going to include the lecture that's coming up on Monday, which is functions, but everything up through this lecture. So we've talked about binary, we've talked about terminal and terminal commands, we've learned variables, expressions, conditionals, and today loops. All of that will be included. Otherwise, Monday's lecture will not be included. So with that announcement out of the way, let's go on to our new material for today, which is loops. So what are loops? Well, how in this class so far have we been getting our program to repeat things? One way is maybe you've been running your program over and over. So you have a program that's just a single line, and then in the terminal, you do Python 3 and then the program name to compile and run our program, and you do that again and again. That's kind of frustrating. So maybe the next best thing you figured out is, what if I just repeat the same line over and over in my program? That works. So hello world twice, hello world gets printed twice. Okay, but what if you want to print 3 times? And you have to go back to your code, edit your code, add another line, and print out that 3rd line. It feels like there has to be a better way, because we're going to keep editing our code and copying lines and duplicating them. It's a lot of work. And spoiler alert, there is a better way. And this is what loops are for. So this is what a for loop looks like. And a for loop is a control structure, similar to conditionals as they were a control structure, that runs a block of code repeatedly by iterating over elements in a sequence. Let's break that down, because there's a lot of new words here. So looking at the structure of our for loop, we have the reserved keyword for, which tells Python, that's how we know that this is a for loop. Then we have the variable name, which is going to be a variable that gets assigned values from the sequence over here. Then we have in, which is another reserved keyword that Python uses specifically for loops. And then our sequence, followed by a colon. And then everything after that colon that's indented is part of the body of the for loop. And so what Python is going to do here is it's going to repeat execution again and again of these lines of code inside the for loop. But each time, it'll once it reaches the end of the body, it'll go back and get the next value from the sequence and assign it to the variable, and then repeat the body again. This will be a little clearer as we look at some examples together. And by the way, you'll hear this word a lot, and so I want to introduce you to it now. We call this iterating over a sequence. So iterating over a sequence generally refers to where you have a for loop and the variable keeps getting reassigned to each element in the sequence one by one, and some body gets executed with that value. So why don't we look at some examples? But wait, you might ask me, what is a sequence? We haven't really learned about sequences yet. So before we can see an example of this actual for loop in use, we have to know what can we fill in here for a sequence.